Boruto episode 58, The Tournament Begins. So this episode is pretty much the one I'd been waiting for. It was just basically a straight action episode, and I really loved it. Only one fight was actually from the movie, and that was, of course, Boruto's fight versus the kid with the bubblegum. Other than that, everything was pretty much brand new. Like, we didn't get to see, maybe Sato's fight was in the movie. I mean, it was literally 3 seconds, but I don't remember that from the movie, but it was also 3 seconds. So that was super sweet because that was like the one fight through the whole thing where I legitimately had a reaction. I was like, oh, wow, she actually beat her in 3 seconds, and she punched the crap out of her. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, that was actually 3 seconds long, and she destroyed that girl. And then that was it, and I was like, that was actually super sweet, so I loved it. But the whole episode I thought was cool. The stuff with Shikadai versus the girl with the sound waves I mentioned before, I was like, I couldn't remember if she was in there or not. That fight was definitely not in there because I would have remembered that. But that was a pretty cool fight. Actually, they were all sweet. I actually thought all the fights were pretty cool. Unfortunately, Inojin was the only person that lost because they were kind of going through their whole thing. Boruto, of course, would have lost too if it wasn't cheating. But, they were going through, and I kind of liked that. It was just like this really small element of the episode, but it was just like, we're all in this tournament. Eventually, if we go far enough, we're probably going to end up fighting each other. But for now, we're the Hidden Leaf Village. We need to wipe out like every other village that, came here for this tournament. So as they were going through, it's like, go ahead. And they were just, doing the high fives. And I thought that was really cool, the way it was being handled. So I just thought that was like a cool little thing, like the camaraderie between the kids. And like Inojin, when he was losing, everybody was kind of, sad about that because it was like he was the first person from their village to not actually make it through that level of the tournament. So I like that element of it. Like I said, it's very, very simple, but I thought that was a cool little moment of interaction between the kids. And then all the fights I thought were cool. The Boruto one, of course, I'd already seen, so that was just cool to watch again. But Shikadai's thing, like I said, I thought that was actually a pretty sweet fight. Sadara, like, just destroying that one girl was just sweet because I was like, she talked about the 3 second thing and then it was actually 3 seconds, and I was like, well, that just looks super cool. So decimated. Inojin unfortunately got beat up. We still didn't really learn much about the kid because I was curious. The guy with the kid with the mask, and I mentioned like I'm curious where that's gonna go. Like, what's his power? We don't know. He was just better than Inojin. That was pretty much it, and he beat him. Like, no reaction to the paper bomb, so maybe that'll come back like in the future episode or something. But it was just like, okay, paper bombs had like no effect on him. Inojin didn't seem like he was pulling out any tough moves, if I'm being totally honest. Like, he drew the birds and they were like flying at him. And then it was like, okay, the paper bomb move. But I was like, he's, the stuff we've seen Sai do where he's just like, super beast scroll and he's got like a bunch of things coming out at once, or at least multiple lions. And it was like, oh, he threw some birds, the paper bombs did nothing. And he had like one little lion. And I'm like, that's too bad. Like, he's going to lose. Like, and it was just like, oh, that sucks. But all the fights were definitely cool. And then, of course, they ended on the fight I think we were all kind of waiting to see, which I didn't expect it to end up being Chocho versus Shinky, if I remember his name right. So I wasn't expecting that, but I'm excited for that. And they make, of course, the whole promo, I thought it was kind of funny how they did it, where it was like, it's Boruto versus Shikadai, and it's like, we're finally going to be going up against each other. And then at the very end, it's like, hey, you guys skipped over my fight. Like, I'm fighting before you guys. Like, what about me? So I'm actually curious to see how that's going to play out. And I'm hoping, because Boruto versus Shikadai is basically, it's just stuff from the film, I'm hoping they don't cut Chocho's fight short, because I think everyone wants to see, as much as I like Chocho, but everyone wants to see Gaara's son fight, because it's like, all right, let's see him in a full, combat scenario. So I'm hoping they don't cut it short on that, because I think they did a great job with this. It was like, okay, they shot through Boruto's fight, and then every other fight, outside of Sadara, was, personally at least, I think a fairly decent length, and they shot through it, and it was like, okay, we saw Inojin lose. We saw Mitsuki go up against the one kid who was using like the lightning to make his moves faster and stuff like that. And I think their fight was probably the second shortest out of all of them. But they went through a couple of fights, and I was like, I think all those were a decent enough length. And then it's like, all right, now we're coming down to our last two fights, which is, Boruto versus Shikadai. Or I guess technically it won't be our last two fights, but, clearly with that being like the big focus, it's like, all right, let's go to Boruto versus Shikadai. So then it's like, all right, how quickly are they going to shoot through that? Because that's going to be like the whole, that they might even cut that up into 2 episodes depending on how they want to do it. So that's what makes me curious, like how far into the episode is it going to transition into Boruto versus Shikadai, considering that's like the whole name of the episode. That's like the whole point, is the two of them fighting. That's the first fight between the same village. So I'm hoping we don't get cut short on Chocho versus Shinky, because I think it'll be a cool fight. And she's fairly powerful in her own right, so it'll be curious to, I'm curious to see how they'll play that with, just like going up against Gaara. It's like, all right, well, you have all this sand, but that typically works within a certain realm because you have, a certain amount of sand. You have typically going up against someone is like, oh, all right, well, I have this much sand. You are this much height and width and all that stuff. I know what to do. And then you go up against Chocho or, anyone from the Akamichi clan. And then it's like, well, I'll just become a giant. And then you won't have enough sand or metal or, whatever Shinki's technically using to cover me up. So I'm definitely excited to see how that fight's going to play out. It seems like it's going to be intense, even though they only show like the last 10 seconds of the promo was actually her fight. But they show Choji and how he's looking on and how he's nervous and stuff like that. So I'm really hoping it's like I'm hoping it's half the episode. I would love for it to be like at least half the episode, or even more. That would be great. I'd be totally fine if they just didn't want to spoil what happened in that fight because it's brand new. So I'm hoping it's a decent length, like 10 minutes of the episode at least is Shinki versus Chocho, and then we go into Boruto versus Shikadai, which is straight from the film. So I know for everyone else it's like it'll be cool to see, but for me and everyone else that either read the manga or saw the movie, it's like, oh well, been there, done that, possibly twice. So for me, I'm way more excited for the Chocho stuff because that's something that's brand new. Maybe that was in the manga I mentioned a million times. At this point, I don't know what has or has not been added, in the manga because I stopped reading. I stopped reading, before they even technically got to the tournament. I stopped reading it and I was just like, and I just started watching the show. So I don't know if any of this stuff was in the manga and they've, added it as well to the anime, but I'm hoping we do get a decent chunk of that fight and then whatever for the stuff that came from the movie. They could even shorten it and I'd be like, whatever. I've already seen it. I still remember. I know how it ends. So I'm not even, like that crazy about it, but definitely a fun episode. It was, like I said, exactly what I wanted from the very beginning. It's like we're going into the chunnin exams. If they're going to be doing all this movie stuff, they need to just be like, hey, let's do an episode or maybe even two where it's just brand new fights, cool fights, and that's it. And that this episode, I would say, 100% delivered. Like we got the Boruto stuff from the movie, and then everything else, we just got to see some cool, fights, and we got to see some cool characters, some decent action, cool stuff with Shikadai and stuff like that. So definitely loved it for that, and hopefully that's what we get. Like I said, the next one, just do a half and half thing, and then we can just go back into the movie stuff and just see how that ends up playing out. But of course, I would love to know what you guys thought about this episode, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it, and I would love to know your predictions. Who do you think is going to win between Shinki and Chocho? And I also want to know your predictions between Boruto and Shikadai. Even though Boruto is using his device, do you think Shikadai is smart enough to figure it out? Because that's like the whole point of his character, obviously, just like Shikamaru. Do you think Boruto, or not Boruto, but do you think Shikadai will figure it out before the fight ends? And if he does, how do you think that'll end up playing out? So I would love to know your predictions for both those fights, who's going to end up winning and how, just how that's going to play out. And like I said, I definitely want to know what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.